is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is Friday, December 4th, 2015, and I'm interviewing Bob Crocker for the Cowboy in Every County series, sponsored by the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. Mr. Crocker, you got your undergraduate degree in physics from OSU, did part-time teaching at a vo-tech school, and then went back and got your master's in adult education while also earning your living farming. I look forward to learning more about your life and career and your OSU memories. Thank you for speaking with me.
You're welcome.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Henrietta, Oklahoma, and until I was about 6 years old, we lived in McIntosh County near Eufaula. At that time, my parents moved to Stone Bluff, Oklahoma. They were both school teachers at the time, and we lived there until I was in the 6th grade, and then we moved to Bixby, and I finished high school then in Bixby, and from there went to Oklahoma State.
What did your you mentioned they were both school teachers, your mom and dad?
They were both school teachers. My dad also had farmed and ranched as he grew up, and he continued to do that as he taught. And when we moved to Bixby, they bought a farm in Bixby and built a house there. And that's where I grew up after 6th grade. And that farm has since been sold, but that's where I was living when I went to OSU. Yeah.
Any brothers or sisters?
I have one sister, Nidra. She currently lives in Stillwater. She's a retired school teacher from Stillwater Public Schools. Yeah.
It ran in the family, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What was Bixby like when you were growing up?
It was probably a pretty typical small town, self-contained community. Principally a rural community. It was close enough to Tulsa that a lot of people lived there and worked in Tulsa, drove back and forth. But it was like a lot of small towns of the 50s and 60s where you had a complete economy in the town. You know, you had stores, you had clothing stores, hardware stores, gas stations. So it was a little self-contained community, nice place to live. Yeah, yeah.
So what were your chores around the farm?
Well, they were the chores that every farm boy goes through. You fed cattle, you milked cows, you worked the fields in the summer and the winter. Pretty typical rural upbringing. You did everything, yeah.
What did you do for fun?
Well, I've always said I had a charmed childhood. I had a horse, a dog, and a 22. But fun, I loved to hunt, I loved to fish, loved to ride horses, get together with friends horseback, and we would ride. Then as I got older, I became very interested in cars. And so I've been a gearhead ever since, but that's what we did for fun.
What were your favorite subjects in school?
Science and math were my favorite subjects. I also really enjoy reading history. I liked history and I've continued that my whole life. But probably in high school, my favorite subjects were chemistry and physics and math. Those were the things I liked. Yeah.
Were you sort of on a science track by high school, or?
I think so. I think I wanted to do that, and that's the reason I enrolled in science at OSU when I did. But yeah, I think I was on a science track by high school. Mm-hmm.
How did you end up choosing OSU for college?
Had friends that went to OSU, And I thought that if you were going to pursue a study in science, you probably should go to OSU or OU, one of the two. And since I had a lot of friends at OSU, one of my good high school classmates went to OSU on a football scholarship. Others went there like myself in science and engineering. So it was, I think, pretty well not a question. I was going to go to OSU.
And probably not a question that you were going to go to college either.
No, that was not a question. I was going to go to college.
Your parents would see to that.
Right.
So what years did you attend OSU?
From 60, I enrolled in the fall of 60 and graduated in summer of 64. And after that, at OSU, I was in advanced ROTC. And so I got a commission in the Army following graduation, and then went on active duty in the Army in September of 64.
Oh, wow, okay. We'll talk about that a little more too. So when you enter as a freshman, are you planning on a physics major per se?
I was not necessarily per se. I had enjoyed high school physics and just decided to enroll in that. A bachelor's in physics is pretty much a general science degree.
Okay.
And so that's the reason I enrolled in physics. Yep.
Who's a professor or professors who stood out for you?
At OSU? Well, I've been thinking about this since we talked about the interview, and I can recall the amusing ones, not the difficult ones. I had one math professor I've thought of often. I think his name was Professor Schultz. And as I recall, he was a small man. He wore the same sport coat every day, and he would draw vectors on the board in the math class, and he had his sport coat pockets full of colored crayon or chalk. And so he would draw vectors on the board with red shanks and yellow heads, and so by the time class was over, it looked like a coloring board. But he was a great professor. The other thing unusual about him, he required you to take math tests in blue books. Now, a lot of people probably don't remember blue books, but that was unusual for a math professor because you'd have to bring quite a stack of blue books to do a test. But I remember him. Another one that was actually a chemistry professor, Colonel Breedlove. He had been a chemical officer in World War II, and of course this was just 15 years after the end of World War II. He loved to regale us with stories of his World War II experiences. He also had a favorite faux student that he called S.L. Jones, Slow Learner Jones. Slow learner was always the guy that could not get the concept in chemistry class. He was a great professor, but had a lot of good professors at OSU. Yeah.
What buildings did you have most of your classes in?
Well, the chemistry physics building, classroom building, Whitehurst, those are the ones I remember. I think it was Whitehurst where you had to go to enroll in classes. And at that time you had to go get cards, and then you'd go over it. If you had a class that's difficult to get in that you needed, you would have to go at like 3 a.m. in the morning to get in line to make sure you got at the head of the line to get in that class, because once it filled up you couldn't get in. And that was the process then.
My goodness,
Yeah.
that's devotion.
Well, everybody did it. That's the way you did it. If you had classes you really need to get in that semester, you had to go through that process. So I've done that several times. You go over there early, way before daylight,
and
wait to get into
get
that
your
class.
place in line.
Now, of course, it's all computerized. This was long before that.
What was the environment on campus outside of the sciences track like, do you think?
Well, it was friendly. Student union was popular and a gathering place. I used to, there were ongoing chess and bridge games at the student union where you could just sit down and join in.
You didn't play for money though?
No, not for money. Didn't have any. But no, it was a friendly campus, very friendly campus. Yeah.
Where did you live?
I lived off campus all 4 years. I lived, I think it was Willard Hall on Knobloch. I lived right across the street from that in my first year. Then I moved down to 324 and a half South Knobloch. I remember that address well because I lived there 2 or 3 years. It was right down the alley from the Hideaway Pizza. So, but I lived off campus, and we would, usually I lived with 1 or 2 other guys, and we would make our own meals, which was a lot of fried spam, other unhealthy things. But
were they some of the friends that had gone to OSU?
No, they were not. Let's see. No, they were. The first year I lived with, it was a big boarding house, and I lived with one person from Bixby who had been a friend in high school. And after that, it was other guys I met at school. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Were you also working part-time?
I worked some. I worked in a grocery store on North Main Street, some part-time, but usually not. I usually did not work part-time, but I did one semester I worked over there, yeah.
What other types of activities or on-campus organizations were you involved with?
Well, other than partying, which maybe we should avoid. I did play a bit of golf in those days. Wasn't any good at it, but the golf course then was out north of town, and I'd go out there and play golf some. Other than that, not much in the way of activities on campus, other than going out with friends to eat, things like that. Yeah.
What sporting events did you attend? Well,
my favorites were the wrestling matches. Of course, OSU has a tremendous wrestling program. As I recall, of the 4 years I was there, we won the national championship 3. OU was the runner-up. And the 3 years we won it, I think OU was the runner-up. So, and I would even go to OU to the matches. But I was a big wrestling fan. We had a tremendous program. I liked basketball. We go to basketball games. But without a doubt, wrestling was my favorite.
Had you done some of that in high school?
No, I had not. I was not a wrestler. I was too skinny. But yeah, we had a great wrestling program. Yeah, Myron Roderick was the coach, and he's famous over there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What was your favorite place on campus?
Probably Student Union. Yeah, probably Student Union. Went there about every day, drink coffee or visit. And I expect it's still a favorite place. Yeah.
What do you recall about any campus tradition?
Campus tradition. Nothing comes to mind as far as a campus tradition. I can recall some specific campus events that were meaningful to me. Particularly, I was in school when John Kennedy was assassinated. And they had a memorial service on the steps of the library 2 or 3 days after his death. Now, I remember that specifically because that was a difficult time. The other thing I remember that while I was in school that stands out is the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was in ROTC, and of course this was the time of the draft, and most men there, if they weren't in school, they were drafted. And you know, for a few days we thought we might be going to war, and everybody was glued to the TV. The same with when John Kennedy was assassinated. For 2 or 3 days, all you did was you wanted the news. But those two events have stayed with me all these years. I remember those well, particularly that memorial service for John Kennedy.
How did the classes handle that? Because I know sometimes professors, you know, when that's heavy on students' minds, how did
I don't recall any classes being canceled. Now, they were canceled for that memorial service. As I recall, it was like 10 o'clock in the morning one morning, and I think President Wilhelm spoke, and the president of the student body spoke, perhaps a minister or two, but they were canceled for that, and there was a big attendance. The quad out in front was pretty filled. Yeah, remember that one.
Tell me a little bit about dating.
Dating, well, I had a couple, 3 girlfriends, and most of the time I was at school. I did have an automobile, but dating was pretty typical for that era. Go to movies, go out to eat.
Where'd you go to the movies?
Well, I can't remember the name of that theater. It was down on Main Street. Don't remember the name of it, but that's where we'd go, movies, and go get pizza or something. That was about it. Yeah.
Right. You were probably popular with that car.
Yeah, I probably was, but yeah, I did have a car most of the time I was there.
How often did you go home while you were in school?
Oh, it kind of tapered off the longer you're gone. When I first started, probably every couple, 3 weekends, and then less and less. But I'd typically get home at least once a month, even all through the school. It was fairly close, you know, 2-hour drive, easy to get to. So, yeah.
Brought some of your friends home too?
Yeah, they'd ride home with me. We'd carpool back and forth. Yeah.
What do you remember about homecoming?
See, I remember a couple of homecomings, and I guess I was in a military society called Scabbard and Blade, and seemed like maybe it was Scabbard and Blade. We worked the concession stands during homecoming, a couple of games. We didn't have a particularly successful football program in that era. You know, it was hard to beat Nebraska or OU, and those were the ones that counted. But I'd usually go to homecoming, yeah.
You mentioned the memorial service at the library, but any other memories of the library?
Spent a good bit of time there, but it's a nice library. Nothing particular other than that memorial service that stands out. Yeah.
How about Theta Pond or?
I remember there was I don't know what organization that was. They had Theta Pond was kind of run down, and there was a group on campus organized a cleanup, and went over there a couple of Saturdays and helped clean up Theta Pond, and made quite an improvement on it. But it was a central point of the campus. Yeah.
And how about any pranks?
Pranks?
Any school pranks?
No. I wouldn't admit those anyway.
What are your memories of the town of Stillwater?
Well, I remember Swim's Drugstore. That was a popular place. Went there to drink coffee a lot because I lived pretty close to it.
And they had
and-
dancing too, didn't they?
Dancing?
Maybe not at the
I
drugstore.
don't think so. And
Okay.
then Campus Drug down across from the fire station. That was a real problem. When I lived on South Nom Block down by the Hideaway, that's where we'd go for coffee every day, or Cokes. And I had a lot of friends that were in the fire protection program, lived across the street in the fire station. And I remember that from Stillwater. Other than that, not much.
And how about graduation day?
Let's see, I think Richard Nixon spoke. Well, no, it wouldn't have been Nixon. No, that was enough. I went back to see Nixon speak later on. But it was at the football stadium, and just time to get it over with.
Yeah, anxious to move on. Now, you mentioned after graduation, then you entered the service.
Yes.
Can you tell
Yeah, I
us
was in the military 2.5 years on active duty at Fort Bliss, Texas. And this was during the time of the Vietnam War, but I never did go to Vietnam. I had a great time in El Paso at Fort Bliss, and that was one good outcome of going to OSU was going through ROTC, getting commissioned, because that opened a lot of doors.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good experience. Yeah.
Now, you hadn't met your wife yet.
No, I met her when I was in the service in
Okay.
El Paso. Her dad was a career military officer, and we started dating while I was on active duty there, and then we got married about 6 months after I got off active duty.
After you left the military, then what happened?
I worked about 6 years in engineering positions. With my degree, I could get jobs in engineering positions. I worked at Public Service Company of Oklahoma for about a year. And then I went to work for American Airlines.
So you were up in this area again?
Yes, I moved back to the Tulsa area after graduation. And then, of course, we got married. And we got married while I was working at Public Service Company. And my wife finished her degree then. She was like about a year at TU. She started teaching school in Tulsa. And then after Public Service Company, I started working at American Airlines. And I worked there 5 years. And all this time I was involved with my father in his farming operation. So then I quit at American Airlines and started farming full time.
Mm.
And that's what I've done since.
And was your father also raising mainly wheat and
And cattle.
Okay.
Cattle, wheat, soybeans, operation similar to what I have now.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
When did you get your own farm?
We bought this place in, actually bought it in 73 or 4. We moved here in 83, and we've lived here ever since, so 30-some years here, yeah.
What are some of the special challenges of farming?
Weather, markets, it's a long list. Drought, of course, that's weather. Weed control, it's a lot of unknowns in farming, and you can mitigate some of them, but yeah, it's just like farming's always been. You're pretty much at the whims of the weather and the market, and you just try to do the best you can and make the best decisions you can.
What are some of the rewards?
Well, rewards are when you get that really good crop, which occasionally you do. Of course, the other reward for me particularly is I like being outside. I like the work. I like the equipment, and you are your own boss. I like that. And it's a pretty independent lifestyle. That's what it is. You can be pretty self-sufficient if you're on a farm, and I really appreciate that. So I think that's the biggest reward, is the self-sufficiency.
How did you become interested in teaching at the VOTEC?
I had a friend that was that taught over there, and he knew my background, and they occasionally would need subs in their auto mechanics and industrial technology programs, and I would go over there and sub, and I got interested in it, and and I'd always wanted to go back to school, so I used that to go back to school in adult education, thinking that might be something I want to pursue, but I just did it on a part-time basis. I never did it full-time. But they have great programs over there, and I enjoyed it. They do a good job.
What was the name of the vocational school again?
It's Tulsa Tech.
Tulsa Tech, right.
Tulsa Tech.
Yeah, they are outstanding.
Yeah.
But you went back to OSU for your master's
Yes.
as well. So were you then commuting to the Stillwater
Well,
campus?
by this time OSU has a Tulsa campus, and I was able to do most of it in Tulsa. There were there was some commuting, maybe one class each semester. So yeah, we drove back and forth quite a bit, but probably more than half of it I was able to do here in Tulsa. So it made it easier, but no, there was some commuting back and forth. And we'd carpool. We'd meet in Tulsa. It'd be a group of us. Meet in Tulsa and carpool back and forth. Yeah. It took, as I recall, 2-3 years to do it. Yeah.
What were some of the highlight classes or professors in the master's program that stood out?
Had some good professors. Gary Bice was a great professor. He taught strategic planning. Bob Nolan, good professors, really interesting. I enjoyed the program. It was a good program, a lot of reading and interesting subjects. Yeah, I liked it.
How did your master's degree kind of change your approach to teaching VOTEC?
I don't think it changed it. I did it more out of self-interest, I think, for myself, rather than trying to change the way I taught at VOTEC. Gave you a little better appreciation for what VOTEC does. But no, I don't think there's any change.
And of course you had this background in repairing cars and I'm assuming farm equipment too.
Right.
Did that play into your ability to teach over there?
Oh yeah. Teaching both the industrial technology and the auto mechanics was something I was quite familiar with or without the degree. That's what I do, and that's one of the things I enjoy about farming. Yeah, is working on that equipment.
Right.
Solving problems.
Constant repair and problem solving.
Yeah.
How did attending OSU and earning your degree impact your life, do you think?
Well, I think any education is good. It doesn't matter what you do, and it broadens your viewpoint. So I think that's a general impact of anybody that continues their education. And I'm an avid reader. Always have 2 or 3 books going, but I'm just a big believer in education in general, and so that would be the impact, I think, as opposed to a specific impact. It's a general impact, and I think it's a positive one.
And you've done some traveling too.
Oh yeah. My wife and I we like to travel and camp, and historical sites. Travel pretty much all over the western United States. Yeah, we like to travel. Yeah.
Have you stayed connected to OSU?
Oh, only through my sister and her husband, who's a retired OSU professor, and I've stayed connected that way. And then, of course, my involvement getting the master's degree. But other than that, no, I follow the sports some, but I'm not avid about it. No, it's good when they win. It's better when they beat OU, which doesn't happen often enough, but especially this year. But no big connection.
So you're not really aware of any other Cowboys in Broken Arrow area?
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yes. Have a neighbor here who's real active OSU alum in the ag community. Yeah, there are several of us around here that are OSU grads, and we kind of know that. We mention that to each other occasionally.
Is he also farming, or?
He farms also. Yeah.
And they have such a strong, of course, ag background, but that wasn't you didn't even take a class, right?
Nope.
When you were at
I didn't
OSU.
take one ag class.
Yeah.
No.
You already knew. I'm not sure. Have you had anybody else in your family or extended family attend OSU?
Well, my sister
That's
graduated from OSU, and she eventually got her doctorate there. And so, yeah, that's the only immediate family member. Yeah.
What can you tell us about Broken Arrow? If somebody were visiting, what should they know?
Well, Broken Arrow has evolved somewhat like Bixby, even more so. When I was young, it was a self-contained rural community, close enough to Tulsa for a lot of commuters. It's now a big suburb of Tulsa. It's over 100,000 people. It's also developing a real active downtown area, as a lot of cities are. But have a good, strong school system. My wife retired as a teacher from Broken Arrow. And yeah, we enjoy being part of the Broken Arrow community. It's an active, good community.
What advice would you give to students at OSU today?
Realize that you are being given a big opportunity by going there, and do as well as you can, because it will pay off. As I said earlier, just in general, the educational background enhances you. But it's a good institution. They're fortunate to be there, and I hope they make the best of it.
How about faculty or administrators? What would you tell them?
Well, I don't know if I could give advice to faculties and administrators. I think they do a pretty good job. I know universities are under stress now financially, and I'm sure that they're all cognizant of that. I know, but no, I couldn't give advice to faculty. I wouldn't feel qualified to do that.
I just want to briefly mention your interest in music, both, and art. You have a home filled with art and wonderful things. Do those relate back to your undergrad experience in any way?
No, it does not. Although Stillwater has developed a very strong musical culture now with the Red Dirt movement, but my wife and I both really enjoy music. We like to dance, and we go quite often dancing. I try to do a little music, and that's all I'll say is I tried. A little guitar picking, but no relation to OSU, but Tulsa, Stillwater have a strong, particularly country western music background. I mean, we went to see Garth recently, you know, one of 7 shows with 17,000 people. It's amazing.
Great. Yeah.
He started out playing at the Student Union at OSU. Yeah.
Did you ever see him play there?
No, never
Okay,
did.
yeah.
He was long
He was
after.
long
He's
after
quite a bit
you,
younger,
yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I have friends say that's where he started. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great story. Well, it seems many OSU students and alumni are very loyal to the school. What do you think it is about OSU that sparks such loyalty?
Well, I think it may be their roots as an agricultural college, and this is an agricultural state. And so initially it started out to service that community, and I think that's continued. I would say that might be the roots of it, is the ag connection. Of course, now it's branched out into much, much more than that. But a lot of OSU students come from small towns, rural backgrounds, and I think they connect there pretty well. I think they're welcome there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to add a quick postscript about being in the National Guard, which you just remembered.
Well, while I was at OSU, I was also a member of the National Guard. They had the 120th Engineering Battalion, a company of it there in Stillwater. Captain Buck was the company commander, and he was also in the Stillwater Fire Department. The day that John Kennedy was assassinated, I remember specifically I was in my car on 6th Street going to the National Guard Armory to conduct some business, and we all remember where we were at that particular moment, and that stuck with me this whole time. I remember exactly where I was. And then of course then it was the memorial service, but it was, the National Guard was a good experience while I was in college.
And you spent how much time with the National Guard?
Well, I was in there 2 years, and you'd have a meeting once a month, and then also we'd go to a 6-week summer camp. So it was a pretty big commitment. But and of course also while I was at OSU as part of the ROTC program, I went to a 6-week summer camp at Fort Sill. That was part of the requirement for advanced ROTC. So I had both the National Guard and the ROTC background when I went on active duty.
But you didn't actually have to. The National Guard was never called up for an emergency?
No, never was called
okay.
up. Never was, yeah.
All right, well, thank you again, Bob. I think it was important to add that.
Okay, thank you.